Okay, so as I've said, tonight's kind of session is going to focus on use of AI to reduce workload. Some of you might think, why am I only telling you about this now? I know and I'm fully aware that lots of people will probably be already using AI for different things. What we are mindful of is ensuring that when people are using AI, that we've got the skills as a teacher to use it appropriately and make good choices, if that makes sense, in terms of our use of AI, because not everything that AI generates is good stuff, if that makes sense. So that's why we've tried to make sure that we leave it towards the end of the program before providing some information about it. But from our point of view, we're more than happy for you to be using AI as long as we're using it appropriately and, like I said, making some appropriate decisions. So let me just go through. We always start with our core values. Hopefully, by this time in the year and at this point in the program, you're very familiar with what those core values are of excel, inspire, and care. And obviously, I suppose that one around inspirational training for aspirational teachers and a genuine commitment to professional learning and evidence-based practice again explains the reason why we've chosen not to introduce AI until kind of now within the program, because we want you as the teachers to have had that professional learning and that understanding of the evidence-based practice before kind of asking ChatGPT to do it for you, if that makes sense. So that's one of the reasons why it's in there. So, what I'd like you to do to start with is just have a think, put in the chat if you want to unmute and share anything just for a couple of minutes. Have you used AI before for teaching? I should have added that to the question, shouldn't I? So, not necessarily for anything outside the school, but as part of the program or as part of this year, have you used AI at all for anything? Have you used it to reduce your workload during this program? And if you have, maybe give us some suggestions of what you've used it for and how you might have used it. So we don't have to have War and Peace or anything, but just a couple of notes in the chat would be great. Or if you want to unmute, Millie, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I've used it for quite a lot of things, but one thing that I found most useful is um creating like sheets for them to fill in, so like knowledge organizers. So, because that's really time consuming, like creating a Word document for students to fill in. So you can ask it to, it's a bit of trial and error. It doesn't always get it exactly how you want it the first time.
Mhm.
But you can ask it to create a knowledge organizer based on a topic that you've done. Um, and yeah, that's really useful.
Yeah, that's great. What we might ask people to do, because obviously what I'm going to share tonight, some people may be way beyond what I'm sharing. Some people may have never used it before. So I'll speak to Emma to see if we can kind of provide an option where people can just give a little bit more detail about maybe how you create some of those different things in terms of creating a knowledge organizer or a resource or things that people fill in so that as a group you could kind of share via the chat or via WhatsApp or different things some of the tools that you have used to help each other. Was it Aisha? Did you want to sort of share something?
Yeah, so for my starter today, I wrote on the slide that I used AI to generate images about conflict because they were going to write a narrative on conflict. So there was like loads of AI generated images on conflict, and I asked them to think about what they imagine when they think about conflict too.
Okay, great, thank you. So I think that's where we're thinking about it. So both those examples you've given me are examples where you're helping your workload rather than it's sort of something that the pupils are going to use themselves. And it could be through kind of resources, it could be through text and things, it could be to support your planning, it could also be obviously a range of things. That you might use it for. Where it's something different is if you're actually getting the pupils to use it. So we're not going to really go into the detail about that today, but what I would suggest that if you are using it with pupils, you really do need to speak to colleagues in school around what their policies are for the use of AI in school. But lots of other examples coming through in terms of quizzes or extension tasks or using gamma AI and those sorts of things, different ones, visuals and that kind of thing. So lots of people coming up with different bits that they've used it for. Some people might have, or schools might have bought into things like TeachMate AI. Others might be kind of just using a lot of the generative AI that we're working with. So good examples. Thank you for that. Right, so just moving on. Um, Basically, we're talking about generative AI models, and I'd suggest it's worth considering using more than one. These are some examples. That's not a definitive list because you might be using lots of other things. I could probably ask you to deliver this webinar better than I could in terms of what you're probably using it for and how you're using it, and the different resources and tools. But there's some examples of what you use. I tend to be, I mean, I'm older than some of you, most of you. I tend to stick to things like Copilot. That's probably my first go-to. And if I don't quite get what I want from Copilot, I might go to ChatGPT. I haven't really ventured into very many realms of what I'm looking for. But it's up to you in terms of what you're using. I suppose different things provide different things. So some of them would be better at producing images than others and that kind of thing. And there are lots of things out there, lots of sites out there that work for different things that you could use. For those that have never used AI before, I suppose the difference that we're looking at in terms of generative AI, if you look at the sort of the screenshot when just doing a Google search of who are Leeds United, what that brings up are the web pages where you can then search and find that information that you want and gather that information for yourself. Whereas AI, asking it the same question in Copilot, has produced basically has summarized the information from those websites and told me a bit of a summary of who Leeds United are and told me more of those details and that kind of thing. I thought you might like that football reference, Emma. I'm not a Leeds United fan. I am not promoting any particular sport or football club in any way, shape or form. There we go. So just for those that have kind of not used AI before, that's generally the difference, and hopefully you can see the difference in the way that it's done it. So it's generated the information for you rather than just giving you a site where you can go and find it for yourself. Okay. Couple of things just to be aware of that you should be thinking about if you are using AI, from a point of view of sort of, I suppose, school and leadership. So in terms of every school or trust might have their own policy. If they're a school or a trust that's already started using AI a lot, then they might have produced that policy and guidance for their staff across their schools. But you might find that if it's a school that's not ventured into AI at all and feels that it's cheating in some ways for teaching, which is sometimes some schools' thoughts or approach to AI, then you just need to be mindful of how you're using it. But this is really for you to use personally to support your workload in the classroom. So use AI cautiously. I would be the first point I would make, in the fact that not everything it produces will be great. So you do need to be cautious about what it generates and use your own knowledge as a teacher to be able to assess that. You need to make sure that you follow any school or trust data protection and internet use policies, so that you comply with GDPR. So not uploading any sensitive or personal data and things like that. You wouldn't be inputting into AI like the names or dates of birth of pupils or anything like that. You wouldn't input any of that sort of information. You also wouldn't be able to use anything where you could be caught out with copyright laws and those sorts of things. So you wouldn't input into AI a resource from, say, I don't know, a GTP book, not GPT, GTP. One of the books where you might get a resource or a worksheet or something. Same White Rose Maths. White Rose Maths, it's the intellectual property of White Rose Maths, so you can't put that into AI and ask it to kind of adapt it for certain pupils, because you would be breaking those kind of laws around that. Equally, you shouldn't be putting pupils' work into AI unless it's a specific, because there are tools that schools might have bought into around marking and assessment, and that's fine. There'll be policies around that. But if you're just using Copilot or something, you can't input pupils' work into those, because you've not got the appropriate consent to be able to do either of those sorts of things. It's being mindful that generative AI has age restrictions. You will all be over the age of the restrictions, but obviously other people, if your pupils, probably wouldn't meet the age restrictions for generative AI. So this is more about your use rather than pupils. If you are using generative AI in secondary with pupils, make sure that you're kind of doing that modelling bit first rather than just allowing them to independently use it. I know sometimes in classes you might have asked the children to search for something, and that's all well and good for them going to search and find some information. They go to Google and type things in, but what we're not asking them to do is encourage them to go to Copilot and type a load of things. You do need to supervise any work that children are doing in that way. You also need to, if you're using AI in the classroom with pupils, make sure you educate them about the benefits and risks of AI and all that kind of stuff as part of your online safety program anyway. And I think the last bullet point is the one that I've tried to make all along since we started this Twilight, really, is around the effectiveness of generative AI. It depends on the quality of the training data. So it's only as good as kind of what you put into it. It's also developing its knowledge. So the more that people input into AI, the more knowledge and sort of the training that brain of the AI computer starts to get. But we also need to be able to verify the quality of what it produces and output. So not taking the first thing as being the best, keep working with it and adapting it and getting it to kind of improve, giving it some feedback so it improves what it gives us, just like we would do with pupils. Give AI some feedback so that it can make it better and more accurate for what you need. Okay, so one of the things I was just going to get you to very quickly do, so you could use that particular QR code, or you can use the link to have a quick play with Quick Draw. So what you would do with Quick Draw is it takes you to a platform, and it lasts about 20-30 seconds, I think you have. It might be slightly longer than that because you've probably got about 10 seconds, 20 seconds per picture. But as you do Quick Draw, it asks you on your computer to draw an image, and it tries to guess what you've drawn within a certain amount of time. Okay, so what I'd like you to do, I'll see if I can get the link and put it into the come on. So if I want to I'll put the link in the chat for you if you want to do that. But if you want to turn and go on to mute for a second, you are more than welcome. Let me find the chat again. You're more than welcome to have a play with it and then come back, and we'll have about a minute or two to do that. I don't want to put it into the waiting room. I want to put it for there. Is that okay, everyone? Have a play, just click the Let's Draw at the bottom. I'm not going to do it online right now because my drawing is really not great. Although when I practiced it earlier in the week, 5 out of 6 were guessed. Oh, they're only 5 out of 6. So who's going to get the full house? Great, Harriet. 6 out of 6. Anyone else? Got top scores on the doors? Luke, 6 out of 6 as well. Your drawing must be better than mine. Not bad, Sonia. Didn't like your snail. It didn't like my cannon. I struggled to draw a cannon the other day. Okay, quite a few 6s coming through. Okay, good stuff. So most people have had time to have a go at that now. Basically, just going on to the next slide, really doing that exercise, I wanted you to think about actually what that platform is. Essentially, the machine is learning, mimicking the way that the brain works. So essentially, that's how generative AI works. The more that people put into the internet and into generative AI, the more it's learning as to what's good, what's not good, and it's sort of developing and giving you answers. So it will become more refined as it develops. Do you want to say something, Millie?
Yeah, it links to what you've just said. I was watching a video on it, on like AI use a couple of days ago, which I thought was quite interesting. And it's like you said about kind of don't necessarily trust the first thing it kind of spits out at you. It kind of, especially with ChatGPT specifically, it kind of mimics the way you speak to it. So for me, if I was, to ask about an interpretation of a specific line, depending on how I word that, it's more likely to give me one kind of interpretation, which might not necessarily be the right one. It's just picking up on my tone,
Yeah.
and then that alters how it perceives something, which I thought was quite interesting.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that it's being a bit careful sometimes as well in terms of if lots of people put in a certain opinion into AI, then it might become quite biased. So that's why we've got to be careful that it can have potential limitations because it might not give you a balanced viewpoint. And one of the things that we're going to talk about today when we put in prompts into AI is thinking about also giving it instructions around the tone you want it to produce the content in, because it can do that then for you. Otherwise, like you say, it mimics you in some ways, doesn't it? And provides you the information based on kind of it learns about you, and your bits. I only have to put Exceed Skit into Copilot, and it knows exactly what the skit is because I've asked it a couple of questions in terms of creating a job advert and things like that before, and so it automatically thinks I want everything linked to the skit and that kind of tone. So yeah, I think that's important. Just kind of summarising the quick draw activity, you can then sort of go in and look at it a bit more in terms of how it's gathered that data. So you can see on the screen sort of the screenshot just towards the right of your screen and on the side, you can see all the different pictures that people have drawn of different things. So if, for example, if you clicked then on the apple, it will show you kind of how many thousands of people have drawn an apple and all the different variations of an apple that people have drawn to be able to generate and be able to accurately guess your drawings. So if you wanted to have a look at that and have a play with that at some point, you could do. All right, got that to the bottom. Chris has shared his drawings with us. Thank you for that, Chris. I think I could probably guess most of them. Good stuff. Right. So in terms of prompts, so going back to what Millie was saying in terms of when you put the instructions into AI, we've kind of called it as part of the trust that craft of generating the prompts. So really, when you're generating a prompt for AI, you're essentially giving it the instructions, just like you would do pupils for a task. You're giving AI some instructions, but the quality of the instructions again can sometimes affect what the outcome is that it produces. So sometimes you might think, actually, I need to give it more instructions. My instructions weren't clear enough. It's not generated it for the right audience. It's not used the right source material to be able to do it. So if you're asking it to um, suggest some particular texts, for example, for a topic, you might want to ask it to generate it for a particular year group in the UK. So then it knows that it's looking for a certain year group within the national curriculum. So sometimes saying in the UK is important, or linked to the primary national curriculum or national curriculum in England for Key Stage 3. So sometimes it's important to put some of that information in there so it knows what information it's searching for. If you're wanting it to generate a letter to go out to parents, saying that the audience will be parents of pupils at a school and that the letter might need to be semi-formal or quite formal. You might want it to be informal, whatever way you're doing it, depending on who the audience is, but giving it as much information as possible. For those that haven't used AI before, one of the first points that you might want to go to might be the Academy Trust website, and they've created some different steps around where you might start with AI. So one of the things that you could do is go to AI Step 1, where there is a document which is on the right of the screen that you can download, and it gives you some prompts that you can copy and paste then into AI and tweak them depending on what it is that you're looking for. And it will give you a starting point of the sorts of things to write into AI for what you want to generate. So if you've never used AI before, that might be where I would start and have a think about playing with that. What I'm going to do now is just have a think about what we can do when we're using AI to make sure that we're using our teacher knowledge. So I put into AI a hinge question. I'd asked AI to generate me a hinge question for a year 5 science topic. I think I'd put on, I didn't even specify the year group, I don't think. I just put down, asked it to generate me a hinge question about pollination in plants. Okay, so this is the hinge question it produced. So which part of the flower is responsible for making seeds? A, petal, B, leaf, C, carpel or pistil, D, root. So I want you to just have a think, maybe put in the chat, is it a good hinge question? Would we want to prompt AI in more detail to improve it? What other information might we want to give AI that might help to improve that hinge question? So just have a little bit of a think. So we've got some suggestions already around maybe inputting around what the year group is or the level or ability of the children that are working with it. In general, like sort of, do you think it's a good hinge question? Would it do the purpose that I want it to do in the lesson of telling me whether the pupils understand the parts of a plant? Feel free, you don't have to stick in the chat, you can talk and unmute for me as well if you want to say anything. So Jade said things like ask it to include a common misconception. LL said it might need to meet the specific learning objective. What might be the flaw of that particular hinge question? This is where we're testing people's science knowledge here, aren't we? But everybody's suddenly gone very quiet. So yeah, Jada said it is easy to guess. You would guess that C is the right answer, because we clearly know that roots don't produce. What was the actual question? Let me just move that. Roots don't make the seeds. The leaf don't make the seeds. Petals don't make the seeds. So it's going to be carpel or the pistil part of the plant. I asked it to actually include parts of the flower that would be kind of not the ones responsible for making seeds, but I kind of rephrased it and asked it to use different parts of a plant and still all parts of the plant that are kind of within that same area of the plant. I can't remember what I actually typed in. And it gave me instead petal, stamen, carpel or the pistil, and sepal that time. So it gave me 4 different options that weren't as easy to get, I suppose. So we're testing more of their knowledge of those parts that are involved in the reproductive part of a plant. But would it still be good enough? So possibly it depends what you're asking it to assess, isn't it? Okay, because out of 1 in 4, it could still be a guessed question. And you don't necessarily know whether they understand what the role of the carpel or the pistil is in making the seeds and how that part of the plant actually works. Okay, so just reminding ourselves that actually effective hinge questions, when we type into AI to generate a hinge question for us, we as the teacher still need to know what is the key learning that you want to assess, what could be the likely misconceptions, when do you want to assess pupil understanding before moving on in a lesson? So what part of the lesson are you actually kind of, what knowledge is it that you're assessing and when do you want to use that? Is the question structured well enough for pupils to provide a clear response? Is it accessible for all pupils to be able to answer it? But is it too easy? Is it too hard? Is it guessable? Those sorts of things. So then you might want to refine your prompt for AI. So this is an improved hinge question from AI by putting sort of different things into it and asking more detail. So what do we think to this question? Would we say that this is an improved question that is better for our assessment as to whether the children are ready to move on in relation to their understanding of pollination in plants or not? Feel free to unmute if you like and just tell me the answer. It takes ages if people are writing in the chat.
Is it because that's more likely to address a misconception because it's solidifying their understanding of why rather than just which one it is?
Yeah, Yeah, definitely. So it's giving us the names of them. So they're still linked to kind of petal, the first one, the stamen, carpel, and or pistil and sepal. So the sepal protects the flower before it opens. It's like the green kind of leaf-looking parts of the flower, aren't there, that protect the bud before it opens into a flower. So it does do that, but it's sort of helping us to address any misconceptions and test that they actually understand what the parts of a plant and a flower do, rather than kind of just guessing the name of one of the things, because they could guess the right name but not really have any understanding how that part works. And so we might be moving on before children really understand what it actually does in that part of the plant. So thank you for that, Elle. Let's see. So, yeah, and it does give you an opportunity to then ask further follow-on questions or do a bit of cold calling and those sorts of things. It's also using that vocabulary in some of the questions, things like fertilization and those sorts of things. Definitely easier to assess and not as guessable, I suppose, not as simple for them to do. Okay, so let's just move on again. So that was just a little exercise to get you to think about actually when you're inputting into AI and it produces something, don't just accept it. You're the expert, you're the skilled teacher that's had that training all year. You know more. I'm saying a very bold statement here, but in some ways, you know more. Well, you definitely know more than AI in terms of your class, the pupils in your class, their needs, what you want to teach, what you want to get out of them. So you've got to make sure that you, yes, use AI to help your workload, but reduce your kind of make sure you're still using it with knowledge and the expert view when you're looking at it. If you have used AI before and you've been using your own prompts, there's another kind of useful aspect on the Exceed Academies Trust website. It's under AI Step 2 for those more advanced users. But you can see down the right-hand side, I've put a screenshot of the menu that's on there. And you can see that there's been a bit of a prompt that's already been generated around creating exit tickets. So when I clicked on the exit tickets generator, this is a screenshot of what the website says. So if you are wanting to create exit tickets, what you could do is highlight and copy that particular prompt, put it into your chosen generative AI tool, and tweak it and edit it to what you want it to create the exit tickets for and what particular text it is and those sorts of things. But part of the job of writing the prompt has already been done for you, so it might make it easier. And you can see there are a number of different options there, things like lesson plan generator, so that might give you some prompts that you might put in. There's also things like stretch and challenge bits, word list generators, YouTube recommendations, that kind of thing. So there's a few different prompts that have been created to help you to reduce that part of your workload as well in creating the prompt in the first place. What you would still need to do is edit and refine each of those prompts, and you might have to keep going back to AI to improve it until you get what you want it to produce. The other thing that I was going to sort of tell you about today that you might find useful is, I think it's under AI Step 4. You can see the link at the bottom on the screen. AI Step 4 on the Exceed Academies Trust website, where Paul Butler, who works as part of the central team for Exceed, has created some custom GTPs. So what that means is that if you clicked on I'd like to explore hinge questions, he's created a GTP where he's inputted lots of research and evidence around hinge questions from reliable sources. So if you just ask GTP openly to create you a hinge question, it could be looking anywhere in the world for that information to be able to come up with it and generate the hinge question for you. Where what Paul has done is he's kind of inputted the research from, say, I don't know, Dylan William about hinge questions, or he's inputted something from the EF about hinge questions. He's inputted those sorts of bits into a custom GTP. So it uses that research to generate the hinge question, and it's whether that produces a better outcome or not. You could essentially create your own custom GTPs where you've inputted into that GTP what you want it to use and what research and evidence you want it to use when you then ask it to generate something. So if you're asking about retrieval practice, that GTP has got lots of research and evidence about what retrieval practice is, what it should look like. So it will use all that research and evidence to then produce the retrieval practice task that you're asking it to do, rather than just guessing, if that makes sense. So that could be another area that you might want to explore if you're, again, a more advanced user, a greater depth user of AI potentially. Some other things I wanted to share with you today were tools that I found quite useful just in my own time of reducing workload. I'm not a big fan of reading long, lengthy documents online. And unfortunately, sometimes part of my job requires reading long, lengthy documents. So I've quite liked something called Google Notebook LM. Which is quite a good one. And I've just done a screenshot there to show you of one document and what you can do. So you don't have to pay for Google Notebook LM. You can subscribe, but the only benefit of that is that you can add more sources into one notebook. And I think there are ways that you can get around that without necessarily having to buy the purchased one, because if you just wanted to add more sources and it wouldn't let you add as many sources as you want to, then use a free online tool to convert all of your sources into one PDF and upload them that way, and it's still looking then at just the same information. Some of you might have used LM Notebook as part of your PGCE possibly, because it's a good way that you could use it for that. So you basically add the document that you don't really have the time to spend 6 hours reading. What it then does is it produces some information, but I could type in there and ask it a question and say, tell me what the entry requirements are for a trainee teacher in 24-25, and it will search that document to give me the answer in that chat bit in the middle. So I can ask it questions and it will find the answers in that particular document. So if you just uploaded something related to your PGCE, you could have asked it a question like, what does this document say about formative assessment? And it will then give you a summary of what that document says and give you some of that information that you can use. The other bit that I quite liked about Google LM is that if you'd put, maybe, I might have been telling you how to reduce the time for your study groups maybe here, but if you'd inputted the text from the study groups that you needed to read and look at, what you could have then done is asked it to generate a podcast, which it will use that information, and it puts together a podcast, maybe up to 30-minute podcast, where they will discuss the documents that you've inputted. And that's another way for you to then be able to access the research, because you might be able to play that at all different times while you're doing something else, while you're cooking your tea or whatever, doing your ironing or something. You could have listened to that podcast where it's talking about the research in those documents without you having to sit down and physically read them and take it in. So if you don't learn by kind of reading that way, and take things in as well that way, that's another way that you might want to do it. But you can then also do other things. For example, you can add notes to it, create a frequently asked questions document from the document itself, briefing documents. It will generate whatever you ask it to do within that. So there's lots of things that you could use that for. Some people have already said that they might be using TeachMate AI if their school has purchased it or you personally have purchased it. One of the things that you might want to explore is it's the AI sort of tool as part of Oak National Academy. So it's something called ILA, spelled AILA, and there's the link at the bottom there. It's still kind of in development because AI and ILA is still learning all the time from all the bits that are being inputted. But it's through Oak National Academy. So we know that any lessons that it produces, it's using the English National Curriculum. It's using the resources and the materials that were created as part of, during lockdown and things as well, because Oak National Academy obviously created a number of lessons during lockdown that schools could use. What I like about ILA in comparison to maybe just inputting into ChatGPT is we obviously know that it's using an English source and a credible source for the materials that it's searching for, but also when you start to ask it to create your lesson, because it will create a lesson plan for you, it can create a set of slides for you, which do need tweaking. I'll add that in straight away. They're not the greatest because they don't use images at this point. AI is not developed enough to use images in this particular part of it yet. So you will need to edit that. It can produce quizzes for you and worksheets. But what it does is it asks you questions. It then generates that part of the lesson or that part that it wants you to discuss. And then it keeps asking you questions as you go through the process. So it is maybe more time consuming than just ChatGPT generating it all in one go. But what it means is that you can edit and modify bits as you go. So until you get the document that you want, the lesson plan that you want, and the resources that you want, and it modifies it as it works through. So if you haven't explored it for lesson planning, maybe that's something that you want to try and see if that produces you something that you might be able to use and works for you. There we go. So I'm going to stop there. We've only got 5 minutes left of the time that we were going to have anyway. I'm not going to keep you any longer online unless anyone's got any questions or things that they want to ask. But what I would say to do is like either this evening, another time over half term, next half term, but take a bit of time to explore some of the tools that we've talked about today or the different AI things that you might have already been using to help reduce your workload. Do remember that message all the time, that it's learning and it does make mistakes. It won't get things right first time, and you are the expert. So you need to know whether what it produces is good enough for what you need. But if you do use AI or any of the tools that we've shared today, please share some examples with us so that we can kind of help everybody really and the cohorts going forward, because we don't want you to spend longer on tasks and reproduce things if there are tools out there that can help you to do it faster. So I'll stop sharing there. What I will do is also stop the recording.